Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you this bright sunny morning to the Fair Education Impact Festival. We are delighted to have you all with us this morning. My name's Siwan, and I lead on the Scaling Award for the Fair Education Alliance, and I'm joined this morning by colleagues Ellie, who will be helping us with tech today, and Lauren, who is our comms and membership manager, who is joining us for this session. I'm also very delighted to have Lisa with us from Whole Education this morning, and she is going to be running this session called Words for All Beyond Simple Solutions. So we're delighted to be joined by both Lisa and her colleague Narun this morning, who's going to be supporting in chat and just chatting with you on there. But before we get going, I would like to give you just a little bit of an introduction to us. So we're so excited to have you with us for the Impact Festival, which is taking place until the 29th of April. Please do tweet about the event and kind of all of the interesting and fascinating stuff that Lisa and Narun are going to be sharing this morning. And you can use the hashtag Impact Festival and tag us at the FEA, and we can help to share those tweets and those engagements. So before we kick off, I want to say just a few words about the Fair Education Alliance and the awards we have open this morning. So, as most of you know, the Alliance exists because we believe that no one child's educational success is limited by their socioeconomic background. The FEA is a coalition of over 200 organisations that are collectively working to make education fair in England. So in addition to our collective action and policy work, we run 3 award programmes which nurture and scale innovation. So just to give you an idea of both of these awards, so we have the Innovation and the Entrepreneurship Award, which are both currently open for applications until 18th of May. So really encourage you to consider whether these are right for your organisations, but also to share them with people in your networks who might have great ideas to make education fair. So FEA members can apply for the Entrepreneurship Award, which supports innovation within an organisation, and all members of the public can apply for our Innovation Award, which is for very early stage innovators to turn a great idea into a thriving initiative. So you'll be able to hear more about both awards during the festival, and we have some very specific events happening. You can see details of these on the screen, where you can hear more about the awards and also from the current portfolio of our 10 award winners as they share their experiences. So without further ado, we're going to get started on the session, and to kick off we're going to break you up into groups of 2 or 3 for 5 minutes just to get the session started, so you can meet some fellow members and chat with them about the theme that we're discussing this morning. So once you get into your breakout rooms, we're going to ask you to do a quick introduction of yourself and your organisation, and to discuss the following question. So we'd like you to discuss: what percentage of young people do you believe are reading at a level below their chronological reading age? So Ellie's going to paste that in the chat as well, so that you have that in your group. But we'll give you 5 minutes to chat and get to know other people who are joining the session this morning. Ellie, are we about ready to go? Brilliant. Okay, if you need any help at all in your groups, there should be a call for help button. Just if you select that, and one of us will come in to help. We'll see you in a bit. Welcome back, everyone. Brilliant. We have you all back in the room. I hope you had some interesting conversations to kick off the morning and a great chance to meet some of your fellow members as well. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Lisa from Whole Education, who's going to guide us through the rest of the session. Lisa, over to you.
Excellent, thank you ever so much. And can I just say how delighted myself and Noram from Whole Education are to be here this morning, and how appreciative we are that you've been able to take out an hour of your extremely busy schedule. Certainly it's such an early hour of 9 to 10, when I find that anybody within education has the most pressure upon their time. So thank you. And also to be associated with the FEA, not only in this festival, but also in general. So I hope that when I come to do my hope informal presentation, we're a small but perfectly formed group, so I think it can be more informal, that you can find out a bit more about whole education if you don't already know lots. And I know Douglas is very prevalent within a lot of the charity and non-for-profit section, so you may already know quite a bit, but hopefully that you'll get to know us a little bit more, and certainly our Words for All programme. So I don't know about you, but I left our session, our meeting, with Kirsten saying three very scary words, or four very scary words: Lisa is in charge. So if I'm looking slightly pale when I've come through now, it's because they're the four words you never want to hear, and then somebody cut off out of a breakdown with. So I just want to say that I do see this as a collective opportunity for us to discuss, I suppose, what you were talking about in your breakout room. So would anybody like to unmute and just give a go at the answer, if there is such a thing, to the question about percentage of young people who are perhaps reading below their, what would be their chronological reading age. So anybody? Jane, you've unmuted first, so if we go over to you.
Well, I think what we were saying was, first of all, young people is a bit of a collective. If you look at the different age groups, it varies, and the different situations that children might be starting school, what they experienced before that. But the latest figures suggested by the government for children transitioning from primary to secondary, so sort of 11-year-olds-ish, is 1 in 3. And then adults, it's 1 in 7. So it's sort of, and 4 to 5-year-olds, it varies hugely on what they've had before starting school. So, but it's not just the lockdown. Before that it was 1 in 4 children transitioning. So it was already a big issue.
Brilliant, thank you ever so much. Is there anybody else who'd like to unmute and tell us what they were discussing in their breakout? Anybody else going to be brave and courageous to start off the morning? Well, I'm going to use up my credits on picking on people till we've got a later stage, so I won't use up any of those goodwill credits now. I think, Jane, just to reiterate, it's latest figures suggest. I love that phrase because I've done, over the past 3 years, lots of digging into this, and there does seem to be a huge variety of stats that are available, and certainly not just post-pandemic, but the actual hard and fast data is very hard to come by, and so, like yourself, we are working on the 1 in 3 young people at that sort of 11-year-old period are unfortunately behind in what would be their reading age. Of course, you have to look at how that's measured and what tool is used to measure that as well, but as a ballpoint, there was a reduction between 2000 and 2013, the Literacy Trust suggested, of about 10%, so the gap was narrowing, but it is now seen that is possibly broadening and widening again as a result of possible pandemic or just high-stake exams, etc., that are causing young people to fall behind. What is quite apparent is that there is a larger gap for those students who are deemed to be disadvantaged. So out of the groups, and you know, we could all talk, I suppose we could talk all day about, you know, how do you stereotype or group young people or put people into vulnerability categories, but those parameters that do exist in the education setting, there is certainly an accepted truism that those that are from disadvantaged backgrounds are higher in the stats, with some reports recently saying 45% of pupil premium students at the age of 11. So it really is a significant problem. And I wanted to start off with that question, not only because it was something that FEA asked me to do, but also to get our mind into the mindset of where we've been with Whole Ed in producing this programme, because despite the stats that you've discussed, that you've heard, and that we've just shared now, there isn't a wealth of programmes and resources out there that secondary schools can actually, and this is a secondary school only model, that secondary schools can actually join, and communities that they can join to actually improve this. And we're hoping that Words for All is one programme that fills a gap for schools and for school leaders. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. This is always terrifying when you do this, just in case it doesn't work. So can everybody see my screen? Brilliant, fantastic. That's the first scary thing over and done with. So as I said, my name is Lisa Ling. I have the privileged role for Whole Education to oversee the secondaries. We are an intentionally small organisation. We have 62 family secondary schools, and then I work with a few hundred more secondary schools as parts of trusts or groups or local authorities. And I also was in a wonderful position with one of our local authorities to co-create the Words for All project, which I now currently lead on as well. We've debated long and hard the 3 words beyond simple solutions, because we didn't want that to put anybody off and say, well, if it's not simple, I'm not going to do it. Because as we know, secondary schools are exceptionally busy places, all schools are. And we wouldn't want to put people in a position where they were thinking they were signing up for something that would be a further drain on their capacity, their resources, their time. But we also did want to acknowledge this has always been an issue. Young people and their vocab, their reading, their writing gaps, their oracy gaps has always been an issue. And if we're going to be a bit realistic about it, will remain an issue. Will it ever close? Will it ever be 100% solved and the solution there for everyone? That is, of course, our grand ambition. But there needs to be an over time aspect to the work that we're doing. And as an I was a vice principal for 13 years, but before that I was a head of English and had the remit sometimes of sort of leading whole school literacy. I have been through the process of top tips and shiny things and tricks of the trade, and do this, and all of your worries will be put aside. You know, this will work, and over time have realised that actually we need something that actually takes the complexity of improving young people's English language skills, especially English language speakers, and we need to really embrace that complexity in order to come up with the solution. So a teeny bit about Whole Education first. I know that several people who are here already know about the organisation. But you can see on the screen there, I'm not going to read it for you, but that we do really believe that all young people, and this again is where the crossover is with FEA. I was just going to say FEI then, because I saw it on the screen, FEA, and that, you know, obviously some young people need more support and more attention and different approaches in order to thrive as their future selves in the here and now, as their future selves. And in order to do that, we do work with leaders at all levels. And so we don't work directly with the young people, but we do work with leaders across the different groups in schools. And in the future, we hope to work with young leaders as well, but that's not necessarily something that we do at the moment. So we work with cross-trust leaders, we work with head teachers, we work with senior leaders, we work with middle leaders, and we work with those wanting to lead projects in their own areas, and we help them and enable them to obviously work on the vision. This hasn't changed in 11 years, with one caveat to that. So these all remain the same, and I'll come to that in a moment. So this has always been the sort of principles of whole education as set out in the first instance by John Dunford and Douglas Archibald, who's our executive leader, and John was the chair at that point in 2010. And of course, as you know, politically in 2010, the curriculum was narrowing. It's really important from our point of view of whole ed is that we are about the both and, which is the first point. That academic excellence is very, very important. But equally important is the explicit teaching and celebrating of skills and qualities that go alongside that knowledge. So we don't look at the reductive argument of knowledge versus skills, education in the round, in the whole. But sometimes I think it's misunderstood that we're about extracurricular enrichment and the other. We're very much not. We're very much centred in the both and. The second point is something that again has been with us in the 11 years that we've existed, is that young people obviously need to have agency, and our schools that have worked hard on developing that over a series of years have had, and I use inverted commas here, the most successful pandemic experiences, because the young person switched to virtual and online and home learning because they understood that the learning was for them, and that was young people from all groups, from the you know, what one would categorise as possibly the most able, the most privileged young people, to those that are from the most vulnerable and disadvantaged social settings, and those schools that really did privilege student agency and explicit teaching of agency did very well. Now, here's where the one change has come. We've always had learning is not just in a classroom, it's everywhere. It's what happens in the community, it's what happens with parents, carers, it's what happens with employers, it's what happens beyond the age 19, and that sort of lifelong work. However, we used to have in brackets online, and this year that has caused actually quite an interesting debate, because people say, oh, you've just put online there. No, we always had online, so we've actually gone against the grain and removed it so that it didn't look like we were trend setting, and we've added it in a post-pandemic world. So why Words for All? Well, Words for All fits in, and I think you need to know about whole education to understand where Words for All comes from, because it does actually fit into our personalised, context-based work that we do, that everybody has their own context, that we need to take into account cohort-specific and school-specific needs. It is about creating a network, a passionate network of advocates who are going to improve language acquisition for young people now and in the long-term future. We do hope that it looks to improvement in the system, and it certainly is something that we want to be replicated and scaled, and therefore we want it to be sustainable change. We talk about your commitment to Words for All as being 10 years. 10 years, again, just an arbitrary figure, but it does give that, you know, it does give that message to anybody who's taking part in the programme, that it's about obviously the future, as opposed to just in the here and now, although it does impact the here and now. So that's quite a bold statement, isn't it? A teacher first and foremost for everybody who's on this now. Today you will learn. I'm sort of regretting having put that on here now, because who can tell you what you will and will not learn? So I'm going to change that to today. I hope you learn these things about whole education. If at any point you want to unmute and ask a question, or if you want to add something to the chat, Noreen, the project manager and general all-round brilliant person for Words for All, is going to be keeping an eye on it and will have no problem whatsoever interrupting me. But please do unmute and ask any questions as we go along. We are a small enough group to do that. So in no particular order, I hope we cover these 5 stars. I hope that you understand a little bit about where the co-creation of Words for All came from, and therefore what's the principles and philosophy behind the programme. We've already started to look at why is it so important, and I've already said that in secondary schools there isn't a huge wealth of programmes and opportunities, certainly not that are illuminated and advertised within the sector. So there seems to be a real thirst for doing this, which is brilliant. What it looks like, because it's great to have all these designs and principles, but there needs to be some concrete, well, what on earth am I going to do as part of this programme? Looking at some of the impact. Now, unfortunately, I'd sent this PowerPoint prior to a session we had on Tuesday afternoon where we got the very latest impact. But fortunately, I can now in person add that to the mix. And then also what next, so what we're hoping to do next with Words for All. But if there's anything else you want to find out, please do put it on the chat or unmute and interrupt, and we'll try our best to answer it. So again, this is how we categorise Words for All. We've got lots of things on the Whole Education website if you want to go and look at it. But it is about a locality and trust, and now a school level collaboration that's really important to us. I've mentioned the contextual ideas, but we do believe that there is a deeper gulf that is going to exist for young people with their vocab and their reading. We are not ignoring oracy and writing. Oracy is something that's becoming more and more embedded in the programme. We are, however, going to resist the improvement of writing, because it is our belief that with an enriched vocab, with better reading skills, with improved oracy, you are going to improve your writing. So that's why it's not there. We're obviously piloting it nationally now, which I shall talk about as part of this presentation. So I'm just going to pause. Are there any questions or anything people would want to, or were hoping to get from this session that I haven't mentioned? No, but please do make use of the chat if there are any questions as you go through. So here's our very explicit design, specific design model. We wanted something that looked into the schools and what was successful already in the schools. There's a lot of expertise, and we do try to avoid the word literacy because of the connotations that sometimes has in schools and with individuals and with groups. But what expertise already exists in the schools, and on the premise that school leaders and school teachers and adults in a school know their young people best. And therefore, if you are bringing something from, a central base and saying, actually implement that, it will work, that sometimes is not the most successful, replicable and scalable approach. Not always, but in this instance, we felt that we really wanted to be context and cohort specific. As I said, we wanted to build on what was good, and we wanted to also capture people who had a passion for it. I've been involved in a lot of literacy work where you were encouraged to take people who perhaps were less skilled in the area, or perhaps were from a subject that you wouldn't naturally think about having huge literacy demands, and actually use those people to champion language acquisition work. We actually went from the who is passionate and who wants to develop this and who has the expertise already or the toolkit already that will give them the confidence to lead this and to spread it and cascade the practice. We weren't starting from a blank sheet of paper, and I think sometimes certainly in my experience as a school leader, people would come in assuming that what had gone before, or what was learnt, or what was accessible in the school was to be thrown out and then the new thing was to be put in. We definitely didn't want to go from that point of view. We also wanted to look at peer learning and support, and what was important for us that was that there was then collective responsibility, and that's actually worked, that people who started it and started to become passionate co-creators and ambassadors for it are still part of the project. It's now in its third year, it's going into its fourth year next year, and the 4 co-creating schools are still very much front and centre and very much improving practice in their own school, but also cascading it across their areas. So that was really important to us, that you learn better from one another in a peer capacity. I've talked about the replication and scale, and I've talked about the sustainable network. So we are trying to create a movement of people who are really advocating the fact that this is a complex issue at one time and a long time into the future, but that we just need to keep going with this in order to create real long-term change. So what do we actually do? What are the core elements of the project? So there are 3, if you like, core elements. We work with a school triad. Now the school triad has to have a senior leader in it, because again, for all of the things that I've just rehearsed on the previous slide, in order to have that replication and scalability, to have somebody who's going to put it as a priority in the school improvement and make and that it is given the right level of visibility is really important. So we work with a school triad, so it's a senior leader and 2 other adults. We will say that there is a bias from the prose subjects. So the senior leaders in the main are coming from humanities or English areas. Because of course humanities and English is separated in a secondary school context, unlike obviously at university, and then the teachers have tended to come from that area, but not exclusively, so that it is broadening out. And what we found is that in year 2 and 3 there's been a choice of other leaders who've been brought on board, so those who are already skilled and passionate advocates, but also those perhaps who need to be brought on board, and their buy-in needs to be sought and realised. So we do 3 parts of the programme. So there is a commitment to understanding the very, very best that's out there in vocab and readers, so upskilling in reading and vocab enhancement. And that's for the project that they're doing, but we also have a commitment to pique their curiosity and to upskill teachers in the broader range. So if a school is doing a project on vocab, we still immerse them in some reading CPD, high quality CPD, so that in fact again that's talking about them preparing themselves not only for the now but also for the future, and making sure that their curiosity and their professional development is at the centre of it in the whole. The second part, and I think that this is what's not necessarily front and centre of a lot of programmes on language acquisition, is that when we co-created this with Bolton, we realised we didn't have the second part as part of our core elements. We just had the immersion in best practice and how to plan and implement for change, but that it became increasingly apparent that you could do all of the wonderful approaches for vocab and reading that the experts sort of put forward, and you could do your research and you could be really sort of evidence informed, but that actually the young people have a lot more barriers to them taking on that learning. And one of the things we found in Bolton, which is where we co-created this programme, was that young people, white British boys in particular, felt that there was an identity entwined in their own dialect and their own sort of vocab and their own sort of positivity towards reading and upskilling themselves in reading, and that actually by taking on the new learning they felt that they were in some way not being true to their own identity, their own social grouping. They were actually moving away, and so we saw that there were lots of comparisons with those students and the young people who learn English as an additional language, so those who have a different first language. So a lot of the things that the boys were experiencing, we learned from EAL studies. Also, we felt that a lot of it was to do with self-confidence, self-belief, self-worth. And so a lot of the studies actually had as much work with the students on upskilling them in the technical as upskilling them in the social and emotional as well, getting rid of those barriers that were stopping them from being the sponges to new learning. And then third, and this could be put to any project, so this does really add capacity in a school, but we work really hard on how you plan the implementation, the approaches. David Crossley, who is the other co-creator, who's not here sadly today, but has been sort of really central to the development of this programme, says that most things fail not on the creativity or the sort of you know, the positivity of the idea, but on the implementation, so on how you implement it. So we do a lot of work with people about change management and successfully leading change. So this is what it looks like as a process. I'm just going to have a look at how my time is. So this is what it looks like as a process. I'll speed up a little bit. We start off with the school, with the project launch. We've got some great advocates, and I'll go into that slide in a moment. And we talk about schools, about what's their ambition, but also what's their level of expertise at the moment and where are they going. Very importantly, we work from the point of view of don't go huge. You can do anything but not everything. So don't say you're going to change the language acquisition for all students all of the time in all 7 year groups. Actually pick a particular pilot group and find out what actually works, what is going to make a difference, what is going to make a change. And we partner with GL Assessment on this to do the NGRT. It's a vitally important part of what we do, and we work hard with the schools. So each school does the whole of year 7, but then works with an identified target group as well to really pilot and see what makes a difference. They write up their proposal as mentoring and guidance all the way through this, and then they actually keep a real clear log of what they're doing. So the planning term is the autumn, the implementation term is the spring, and they really sort of are making notes not only on what happened with the young people, but what kind of changes were there in the adults, what worked best in the teaching and aspect of it and the delivery aspect of it, and then we help them to evaluate. And it's been really interesting looking at your schedule from this festival about how much of the input is about evaluating impact. And I think that that is possibly an area, I talk from somebody, you know, within the education system, that's possibly an area that we still need to improve upon, actually taking time to really measure and evaluate the impact, find out what works so that we are replicating and scaling the right things. So it's a year-long evaluation is obviously in the summer term. So these are the co-creators. There's the 4 schools. You can see there, you'll all recognise Alex Quigley. Alex is one of our advocates. But this year, we have also been working with What Works with Children in Social Care. So to look at whether or not the Words for All programme will have a really good impact on the What Works with Children in Social Care cohorts. So those that have been known to a social worker now or in the last 6 years. And so we're in the midst of that programme at the moment. We're working with 2,600 young people and up to 60 schools. So that will be some key findings to look at the impact of this programme. Here are our advocates. I love the fact that Tim Brickhouse is waving up to the and many more. So we've got several people who are inputting into this programme. Again, I think there's a concern about the lack of opportunities there are for secondary schools to really, and just secondary schools. So there's quite a lot in the transition space, but in the just secondary school space, that there's not really a huge amount of programs that secondary school leaders and teachers can take part in. We're working really closely, as I said, with GL. We're working really closely with OUP and their word gap work. You can see Mary's there. We've got David Didow is working with us next week. Alex does at least a day for us. We've got Helen Prince and sort of Tim, many more, Mary Claire Travers, a lot of our schools. We've got Paul Hodgkinson who's working with us as well. So it's a well-resourced programme. So just on what we're finding out so far with the 60 schools we're working with, these are the projects that they are working on in the main. So there's lots of schools doing the reading aloud work, which is based very much on the findings of Just Reading from Sussex University, and also something that Mary suggests that schools might want to look into. So obviously that was done with Year 8 students, but we're looking at how reading aloud could actually impact and have a really positive effect across a school. Pre-teach vocab is something that, so etymology is a big thing that people are looking at, and also whether or not young people knowing vocab prior to their lessons that they'll be doing that week is something. A lot of history there, a lot of geography, some DT, so understanding how you can help teachers to also teach vocab explicitly. Pre and parallel teaching texts that will help. So this is a lot around the Romberger work of deeper learning, so giving young people aspects of really high academic texts, giving them lots of reading. There's examples of schools now that have at least 500 words read per lesson. So people are looking at sort of seeing that at small scale and seeing if it works. And we've also got talk about learning. It's the least popular of the groups of research that's happening at the moment, but it's one that we're going to increasingly look at. I saw there's somebody from Voice 21 with us today. It's one of the things that we're going to be looking in more at for the coming year. So I said about what's the difference sort of that's happened now. Here's just a few of the projects. We've got more data that's come in, but you can see that already it is having a huge impact on young people. The first project on the left was about GCSE PE. It was working with mainly white British boys, and it was building that self-confidence, self-belief. They were looking at exam frequency words, but felt that the young people didn't feel like they could even attempt the question. So they actually put more exams opportunities in. They made it competitive because the boys were absolutely competitive on the field, but not competitive in the exam hall. And they actually met the attainment of their non-disadvantaged peer group boys, and actually on some of the levels actually raised, actually did better than the other peer groups. So there was at least +1 Progress 8 gains in that 1 year of doing the project. But they learned a lot about what the school needed to change culturally as well, and the culture the school needed to have on high aspirations for all young people, as opposed to just possibly those that were sort of self-motivated. Then the next one was with Year 7s and looking at Year 7 reading, and Ofsted actually visited this school. It was in a particular vulnerable position, and they've actually got out of that. They're a good school now in those terms, but it was actually looked at their reading and their reading work that they were doing, and reading superpowers with Year 7 was commented on when they had their inspection. And you can see the school on the right actually does a 6-week withdrawal high intensity program, which is not what everybody would suggest, but it's something that's made huge gains. And in fact, the evidence that we were presented with on Friday was that in some of the older year groups, young people have gone up 4 years in 6 weeks, which is incredible. And yet that is using the NGRT test, so that's absolutely incredible how honed they've got that 6-week program, and it's withdrawing in order to make more rapid progress when they go back into lessons. So here's just some quotations from people who have been on the programme so far. This idea that it is ring-fence time, this idea that it's about cultural change. I love the idea that you've got culture, confidence, and coaching as part of those quotations there, because it's much more than just, here's a programme you can do on a particular one-size-fits-all approach. And then, of course, there's a quote from one of the co-creators. We've got plenty more that we could share with anybody at that point. So what next? I'm just looking at my time. So it's the 4th year for Bolton. So we've gone from, in Year 1, we had 4 schools. We then cascaded to 16 schools. So each of the mentors took on 3 more Bolton secondary schools. Of course, we've had quite a mixed 12 months, but it has stayed at 16. We were intending in Year 3 to go to all 28 schools in Bolton, but of course we decided to stay with the 16 in the year that we've just had. We're working with 16 other LAs as part of the What Works for Children in Social Care group. So we're looking at how we can go to year 2, year 3, year 4 with them. And then we've also opened out to some other local authorities and trust groups. And because there seems to be a need for it, and there is a real appetite for it, and because we've all been forced to improve our understanding and our use of virtual technologies, we are going to have an individual schools programme, but that's going to be purely on a virtual basis, whereas the others are hybrid, face-to-face and virtual. But it doesn't mean we can have a national cohort, and you can see what our vision is, that we want to, you know, I will read that there, passionately committed community of practitioners, and that we will be ongoing from now forevermore to improve the vocab and reading skills for all young people. And I never have a PowerPoint without my Alice in Wonderland slide. Yes, the impossible is always possible if you really believe in it. And so here's our conference if you want to find out more about whole education and also about the Words for All programme. And I'm very happy to take any questions. So I will stop sharing now, just to let you have, it's just lisa@wholeeducation.org or at Lisa Ling Wee, and then the whole education websites.org as well. And our Twitter is #wholeeducation. There we go. And any questions? Nora, do we have any questions on the chat?
There was one question about what tool we use.
Okay, who asked that? I don't know if they want to unmute and just...
Amy Gaunt from Voice 21 wants to know the tool you use to measure vocab.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Hello, hi, sorry, yeah, just be interested to know how you explicitly measured vocabulary. I know there's a number of tools, but I just wondered which one you used.
We have a variety of tools that we use too, Amy, and we leave that to the school. One of the things we've worked really hard on over the last 3 years is looking at the variety of ways that you can measure the impact of a project. We also, the only tool that we say is, if you like, is a must for the project is the NGRT, which of course is the reading, not the vocab. So David Crossley, who is a little bit obsessed with measuring impact, has also done a way of schools being able to codify you know, the movement in sort of vocab, not only in words per minute, which is what quite a lot of the schools use, different methods of measuring words per minute of reading fluency or writing as well, is another way that they measure that. David's also been quite obsessed with making sure that the attitude to and the confidence that having an understanding new words brings, and therefore the outcomes in writing, it might not be very visible that knowing those 10 words. What we found is that the pre-teach vocab, a lot of the schools have done, say, 10 words in science alongside, so the young people will have 10 words that are taught in all a variety of methods, or either etymology or looking at root words or whatever. And that actually when they've gone into their science, even though it's only 10 words, the young people have read more about them, they've extended their own words, they've answered more questions in class, the teachers have noticed that they've been more motivated, they've been willing to make mistakes more, their end outcome for that week's writing has been, so we've been really trying to work with people about not noticing the other things that have improved. So I know that doesn't directly answer your question, but we've left the sort of measurement tools to ones that exist in the schools, which seem to be quite a lot of the ones that are recommended by Alex in closing the vocab gap seem to be quite common as well.
That's great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No, so I think I'm going to hand over to the FEA, and I know you wanted 5 minutes at the end.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much to Lisa. That was fascinating to hear, not just about the program, but also how it's kind of, you're taking a blended approach to scaling this up as well through virtual and kind of in-person delivery, and how that kind of allows you to have a national program as well as a kind of really regional contextual program as well, which is brilliant. Some apologies in the chat from people who have to leave early, start of the day, people kicking things off, but thank you, a huge thank you to Lisa and to Noreen this morning. I know that everyone will have enjoyed it a lot, and a great start to the day, especially with some of those impact that we've seen coming through, and as you say, that impact growing as well, which is very exciting. Before you go, we're going to just open up a poll. Feedback is really, really important to us, so we're really keen to hear your views about the session this morning, and for you to tell us how you think it went. So Ellie is going to open a poll now, so if you'll see that pop up on your screen. So if you could take a couple of minutes just to answer those questions. And then as you do so, I will take the opportunity to mention a couple of sessions that we've got coming up this week. So as I mentioned earlier, the Fair Education Impact Festival is going until the 29th of April, and we would love to see you at other sessions. We have coming up today, we've got a session on leading through uncertainty and adapting to change. And tomorrow we've got a great session on working with schools and other channels to support young people. And just if you're unable to make any sessions, don't worry, as we will be sending session recordings to everyone. So let's see how we're doing. Just one more person to vote. Brilliant. All the votes are in. So Ellie, you can close that poll now. So thank you very much again to Lisa and to the team at Whole Education for presenting this morning, and for you all for joining us. Hope you see you soon. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.